Thank you, Senator Jungbauer. Next up, we have State Representative Mike Noel from Utah, who is running unopposed for his 5th term in the state representative in Utah. He represents District Number 73, which consists of 8 counties and is the largest and most rural legislative district in the state. He is chairman of the Public Utilities House Standing Committee and a member of the Natural Resources and Rules Committees. He's a legislative appointee to the Constitutional Defense Council and co-chairman of the Rural Caucus, the Conservative Caucus, and the Sportsman's Caucus. He's sponsored legislation in Utah to get Utah out of the Western Climate Initiative. He also works as general manager of the Kane County Water Conservancy District and operates a calf cow ranching and farming hay operation in Utah and Arizona. State Representative Mike Noel.
Thank you, Peter. There are 2 handouts that I had. One was on a rational look at climate change and also Utah's energy landscape. I see this one got passed out, but there's some left up here at the front, on the front table if you need one. Appreciate my colleagues from Utah being here. Senator Kurt Bramble and Paul Ray are both Utah colleagues. Appreciate them. They worked in this energy issue in Utah. And also appreciate Paul Chesser. If you don't know Paul, he does a blog called Climate Strategies Watch. I used to write for the John Locke Foundation, now a writer for the Heartland, and it's a great blog. He really is up on these things. I started in this, what I call my battle against the global warming issues about 6 or 7 years ago when I heard a talk by Dr. Patrick Moore, founder of Greenpeace, and he talked about how he believes strongly in global warming, but yet he said we cannot replace the baseload supplies of power with renewable energy, and he talked strongly about nuclear power. And being in an area where we produce uranium and some of the best yellowcake uranium just over the border on the Arizona Strip, also have good supplies of water and an access to the grid, I felt like that would be a good opportunity for Utah to get engaged in that. As I started to study and do some of my research, and by the way, you see me on a horse here. I've been called a bonehead, a dumb cowboy. I do have a degree in zoology from Berkeley. I have a master's degree in plant ecology, and I matriculated as a doctoral student. Didn't finish my degree, but I did matriculate at Utah State University and studied the effects of carbon dioxide, or not carbon dioxide, but sulfur dioxide on lichens and cryptograms, and that was part of my research studies. So I do have a background in biology. I do raise cattle, a cow-calf operation down in one of the most beautiful areas called the Grand Circle. It's in the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. Got really engaged about 12 years ago in politics with the creation of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. You might have remembered that. Bill Clinton created that monument, about 3.1 million acres, and locked up 9 billion tons of low sulfur, high BTU coal in the Copowitz Plateau. Coal that could run the state of Utah for upwards of 400 years. Very interested in what former Governor Allen said this morning about gasification. I've been working on some projects on a process called hydrogasification, technology that was developed at the University of California, Riverside, and some people have bought that technology. We are looking at putting a test plant in Kane County to look at that process and see what it can do. And I really believe that we do have the energy capabilities to be able to become self-sufficient in the state of Utah, and also throughout the United States if we would just look to that. These baseload technologies for power are things that we have to have. Renewable is fine. I've got renewable in my district, but the baseload supplies are what are critical. What I've found with my constituents and also even with my colleagues, it's very, very difficult to get beyond CO2 as a pollutant, air quality issues, some of the issues of global warming, especially when the media is so vocal about these issues. And so what I'd like to do today is first tell a little bit about Utah's energy climate, energy environment, talk about how I've been able to be successful in teaching not only colleagues but also constituents about this important issue. Our new governor, Governor Herbert, we had Governor John Huntsman, who was really a strong supporter of global warming, and he's since been appointed the ambassador to China. And Governor Herbert is now our governor. He's on the same plane as I am. He believes the science is not in, that the conclusions have not been finally developed, and that we do, in fact, have some questions out there. And so he's going to focus on conservation, on our total energy portfolio, looking at all the different, as Governor Allen said this morning, the silver buckshot, to look at all the different areas of energy that are available, mostly fossil fuel energy, and also take a look at conservation and other technologies that can help us meet the energy needs. This booklet, as I said, is on your desk here. It's available to you. Let's talk about some highlights. Utah has adequate, reliable, affordable, sustainable, and clean energy resources. This is one of our proposals. I think Senator Bramble was part of this. We'll promote development of non-renewable energy resources such as coal, natural gas, oil shale, and tar sands. Also renewable energy, geothermal. We have 2 geothermal plants in Utah. Just built a solar 203 megawatt solar farm down in one of my counties in Beaver County. And also, a wind farm, a wind farm. We also have biomass and biodiesel and a small amount of hydroelectric and ethanol. We'll also look at nuclear power generation, as I mentioned, market forces, and pursue energy conservation, efficiency, and environmental quality, and maintain an environment so that the prices are low. If you looked at the chart this morning, Utah is the 3rd lowest cost of power in the United States. We're at about 6 cents a kilowatt. If you just took the coal-fired generation, we'd be down around the 5-cent range. So a lot of our power is generated. We're actually a exporter of power in Utah, and so we do have the potential to supply power to other states. So affordable energy, sustainable economy, strengthening energy security, independence, and reducing emissions. On this subject, Utah is about 2/3 federal controlled lands. It's very, very important that we are able to develop those lands as the government promised us in 1976 with the passage of the Federal Land Policy Management Act. I'm sure Senator Gorman knows about that and what that impacts as far as the western states. But in order to be able to develop those resources and receive the royalties that come from those, we have to get through these environmental hurdles and a lot of the energy requirement hurdles that we're trying to get through. And we found that under at least the Clinton-Gore administration and now under the Obama administration, that's becoming more and more difficult as the environmentalists have a much greater say in what goes on in our state. We've been engaged in a battle for about 10 years now to keep our roads open, roads that we built, maintained, paid for, millions of dollars, belong to the people of Utah, access to private property, access to mineral resources, access to grazing rights, timber rights, et cetera. Those have been shut down for about the last 10 years. There hasn't been one road recognized by the federal government on a statute called Revised Statute 2477. I've also been engaged in that battle. I've also got a pretty good background in the National Environmental Policy Act. I've actually testified as an expert witness in court, so I understand a lot of these issues. We are engaged right now in several lawsuits, we meaning the state of Utah, some of the counties that I represent. We're in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, just had an en banc hearing a couple weeks ago. Tuesday, we got 2 other cases going, actually 4 cases throughout the state to try to get our roads through quiet title. So we have really been on the forefront of trying to keep the federal government agreeing to their promises. This states' rights movement is pushing forward in Utah. The governor has this new governor has been very, very supportive of that, as has been the legislature. Energy production, let's talk about that a little bit. Again, Utah it became an exporter of energy in about 1980. That we have IPP, which is one of the big power producers, and also Deseret Power and Rocky Mountain Power. Most of our energy comes from coal, about 48% of that is coal, some natural gas, and that's energy production, crude oil also, so about 1,167 trillion BTUs in Utah in 2008. Fossil fuels, Utah, interestingly, is the 14th largest producer of coal in the United States. Now, if we would have added in the Kaparowitz Plateau coal, we could have been one of the largest producers in the United States. Again, this is low sulfur, high BTU coal, something we used to call compliance coal, or in the vernacular of the industry, super compliance coal. You can mix this coal with existing coal and create coal or the pollutants would meet the clean air requirements of the Clean Air Act. So these are mostly produced in Sevier County and Carbon County, and 2 or 3 mines there. So Deseret Power, which is a rural cooperative, and by the way, this book that was produced, I'll give the credit to the author, Kimball Rasmussen, is the CEO of Deseret Power. Deseret Power is a nonprofit power company under the Rural Electric Association. And so they're just trying to make sure that the profits and things, or that the monies that go back to the consumers and the people that buy the power, that they keep those prices low. Utah is the 15th producer of crude oil if you take out the offshore oil areas. That's another interesting statistic for Utah. Oil, shale, and tar sand deposits. It was mentioned here by the senator. That's a future for the state of Utah. Oil, shale, and tar sands. Again, the amount of oil that can be recovered. A lot of our oil production in our refineries in northern Utah is coming out of Canada. And so they're actually producing the oil from the tar sands up there, and we're refining it in Utah, where we could be developing our own. Again, this is a problem with an issue with the federal government, getting the environmental regulations in and the regulations to be able to produce these tar sands. If we could, in fact, develop the resources, the mineral resources of our state, this has been one of my mantras since I've been a representative, if we could develop those natural resources within our state, we could move from the state that is the 50th in terms of cost per pupil that we expend on pupils to one of the top ones in the state of Utah. We've got a very, very strong challenge there. Now, our students in our both public education and higher education do very, very well and compete very well, but we could do better with additional funds. Our property taxes are funding a lot of that, as well as our state income tax, which is totally dedicated to both public and higher education. Looking at compressed natural gas, we've got a corridor here. We're starting to move into that direction too, because we do have a lot of natural gas. Again, that's been an issue. You might have heard when the Secretary Salazar came into office that he shut down 77 of our oil leases. These were leases that had gone through a resource management plan process and was supported by the BLM and also by the Bureau of Land Management and also by the state of Utah. Spent about $10 million, had thousands of hearings, 20,000 plus comments, and then when they came into office here, they shut those down. That would have costed our state trust lands. The state trust lands are the lands that were set aside at statehood, Section 2, 16, 32, and 36 in each township, where those revenues would accrue to the school trust lands. Because they're intermingled with federal lands, in order to develop those lands, it's important that we be able to develop the federal lands along with it so we don't isolate those lands. Well, that's what happened in this case. Would have cost us about $250 million to the state trust lands just to isolate these leases and not be able to develop them. That's just some of our production. We're producing more compressed natural gas, trying to get that distributed. It's very, very cheap. I think it's in the neighborhood of $1.50 a gallon for gasoline for natural gas. We do have renewable resources. If you look down in my county, I represent Kane County, Washington County, Garfield County, Paiute County, Sevier County, Beaver County, and part of Iron County. So I have the largest district in the state. If you look over in Beaver County, you can see that there's a wind potential there that we looked at. The Renewable Energy Zone Task Force, the Governor's Task Force looked at this, and there's also geothermal and solar potential. So we have looked at these renewable sources. As was mentioned here, the wind, and was mentioned by Governor Allen, it's very, very difficult to get those wind resources to use them for base load power, so they do come online. They do produce energy. The cost is very, very high. All that energy is being sold to California, and I think the cost is somewhere in the 40-cent range. So the subsidies are there, but it is a potential for our state. We are the 45th renewable energy generation, the 45th, almost the lowest in renewable energy, which makes for a case for if we do, in fact, pass Waxman-Markey, what would happen to Utah? We would be one of those that would actually be a big loser. It's interesting that Henry Waxman from California, Markey from Massachusetts, and Lieberman and Cary and I think it's Boxer that are supporting it, both from California, states that will actually gain because they do have a lot of renewable energy, so they will gain from Waxman-Markey, and we will lose. We'll be paying some big costs to these other states, as well as losing to foreign countries. Generation, again, as I said, this is Pacific Core, mostly comes from coal and also combined cycle gas. Here's one of the things that we passed in our legislature. This is not a mandate. This is a goal. 20% improvement in energy efficiency by 2015, and those are some of the things we plan on doing, is establish public-private partnerships, building energy efficiency, state vehicle fleet. We've worked to promote and fund energy code training for building inspectors. These are some of the things that we're doing. So we're doing all the things we're supposed to do, We've actually reduced the miles driven on our fleets. We had a huge budget deficit this year. We did not raise taxes. We cut spending, and we're able to come into play and balance our budgets. Utah, I think I mentioned this earlier, but Utah was ranked by the Pew Foundation as the best managed state in the United States, which means that it was the state most unlike California. So we have that distinction, and part of it is we look at revenues in different ways. We look at ongoing revenues and one-time revenues. We never try to fund ongoing programs with one-time revenues, and we do have to balance our budget at the end of each session. We have a 45-day session in January and February and part of March. This is another program, an idle reduction program for our schools. Let's talk about the impacts of climate legislation. I actually passed a House-Senate resolution, joint resolution, to get us out of the Western Climate Initiative. Reason being is I think that we're much more like those that are ones that are involved in the process but are just watching the process on the sidelines. They are not actual partners in it, like the Canadian provinces and California and others. The governor, just coming new into the office here and running again, he wants to stay at the table. So he has not supported that, but I'm hopeful that we can, in fact, get out like the good governor from Arizona did, Governor Brewer. We appreciate that. What would Waxman-Markey do? With Rocky Mountain Power, with their energy mix, you could see a high of 33% increase in power costs. Deseret, with theirs almost totally fossil fuel, would be a 90% increase. Utah UAMPS would be a 33%, from 5 to 33, and Utah Municipal Power would be from 11 to 23. Again, utility costs in Utah would rise dramatically under Waxman-Markey. You can see that rise in the red there. What would that do to farm? I'm a farmer, farm energy. This 500 head milking operation, their monthly electric bill is about $1,200. Natural gas bill $750. Their monthly diesel bill is about $4,000. So the cost of energy would $71,000. If that increased in the rural areas, doubled that, that would put us out of business and make it so we couldn't really compete. Wheat farm would be the same thing. The average cost would be about $75,000. If it doubled that, it'd put us out of business. Agriculture is about $1 billion industry and has about a $15 billion impact to the state of Utah, so it's very, very important. The Heritage Foundation talked about gross domestic product loss of a reduction of $393 billion annually for Utah. The loss by 2035 would be $662 billion. We'd lose 1.1 million jobs, but there'd be all those green jobs that would come in that would take the place of all these net job losses. So we would probably end up in a wonderful situation there. We wouldn't. I think we would lose the jobs, and I think those markets would shift. I had the opportunity last summer to go to China for several weeks, and took a trip up the Yangtze River and saw their hydroelectrics. But what I was particularly interested in was all the coal barges that were coming up and down the river, and all the coal-fired power plants along the river. They are building the equivalent of one coal-fired plant about every 60 days. So they are not slowing down, and we hear these things about, oh, they're really getting into solar energy. What they're doing is they're building the solar wind towers and all these things for us, but they're building them with power generated from coal-fired generation. So we're really missing the boat there. How do we explain this to your constituents? This is the Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. Pardon me? Oh, go Gators, all right. Well, I'm kind of a BYU fan, but that's okay. Anyway, Ben Hill Griffin Stadium holds about 90,388 people. If we put this into perspective, at about 350 parts per million, if people look at CO2 in the atmosphere and they say, well, what percentage of the atmosphere is CO2? You talk to your constituents. And unless someone really knows that answer, they think, well, what is it? Maybe it's 20%, or is it 10% or 5%? And even 1%, if they say 1%. Well, actually, it's about 335 parts per million, and that's like at 10,000 parts per million would be 1%. So it's a very, very small amount. If we take this stadium here and we say that's the atmosphere right now, CO2 in the atmosphere, 90,000 in attendance, there would be 35 people equal to all the atmospheric CO2. Out of that 35 people, 10 would equal all human-caused CO2, non-USA. 3 would equal the USA-caused CO2, and 1 would equal all the USA electric power CO2. That's generated by electric power. So one person out of 90,000, that's give us perspective to your people. And where is that person? That guy's right there. That's him right there. That's the guy. So that's a good way to explain it to your constituents, that it's not a reasonable factor. Being a biologist and a farmer, I recognize the need for CO2. Craig Itzo's done some work on this, and others, that we may be in actually a CO2-starved environment, and there may be a benefit to optimize CO2 and to increase CO2 in the atmosphere. How much CO2 can change from USA coal emissions? If we take the average scenario from the IPCC, we talk about 3 degrees Celsius. That's probably what it would be. If we look at that and we look at all the electric sources from the IPCC's own data, if we reduced and completely eliminated all of the electric generation in the nation, it would change it by 0.07 degrees Celsius. That seems to me to be a pretty a radical move to move that. And especially in Utah, if we shut down every single power plant in the state of Utah, every single one today, within 26 days, that power would be replaced in the world. We know that we'll be shifting jobs over our economy. In a recession, I think this is simply wrong. We know that the people that get hurt the worst are those people, the poor people, the people that can't afford it because it's a bigger percentage of their income, electricity and power. I look at energy and power as something that's made our country great. You know, we hear these comments by our president and others that we consume too much electricity, that we use too much power. And there may be some cases for that we do, that we need to conserve. But I look at what America gives to the world, the medicines that we supply, the energy, the technologies, the freedoms that we have. And energy to me, as a policymaker in the state of Utah, does mean freedom. It's very, very important that we have energy. The reason people are clamoring to come to the United States is because of the life that we have here, the medicines that we have, the ability to have more free time, the educational systems we have. We don't need to back up and apologize for these things. We need to show the world how we can produce energy in a responsible manner and to do it in a responsible way. As policymakers, I think that's very, very important. This conference is important. I'm thankful for the Heartland Institute and the work that they've done. It's been one of my key go-to periodicals and the literature that they give out over the past 8 years that I've been in legislature. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much for having me here today. Appreciate it.